Welcome back to Classrooms and Jail Cells, a space where stories challenge systems and where voices, often pushed aside, are heard and full. I'm your host, Uriel. Today's episode takes us into the heart of a moment that changed the trajectory of Taylor. Taylor is a high school student full of potential and curiosity who was suspended in middle school. And what she shares with us isn't just about discipline, it's about dignity, about being seen, about the science that often surrounds unfair punishment. We talk about exclusion and discipline all the time in policy and research, but today we're going deeper, not into statistics, but into the story. Still, let's pause on one number. According to the American Bar Association, white students make up nearly half of U.S. public school enrollment, yet they account for only 36% of school-based arrests and law enforcement referrals. That means even when white students are suspended or referred to police, it's at a rate lower than their representation, unlike students of color, who face disproportionate consequences. But exclusionary discipline affects all students, and its impact can be profound regardless of race. In this conversation, you'll hear from someone I know personally, a former student of mine, who experienced the kind of punitive action that too many young people face in silence. Her voice is not just brave, it's urgent. She'll take us through the moments before, during, and after that suspension. We'll explore how that single decision rippled through her academic life, her sense of safety, and her connection to school. This episode may stir something in you. It might call up memories, spark outrage, or open your heart to possibility for change. Stay with us, because behind every policy is a person, and behind every suspension, there's a story that deserves to be heard, not just documented. Let's begin. Welcome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing okay.
Yeah? Sounds good. So how would you describe yourself as your time as a middle schooler? Your personality, interest, school vibes?
I would like to believe I was an outgoing person in middle school. I put myself out there a lot of the time, and I had a decent sized friend group consisting of 12 plus friends. I'd like to believe I was a nice person too, but a lot of people thought I was mean based off of how I looked. But I knew not to take any BS from anybody. I don't really remember what any of my interests were though.
That's fine, yeah. And what would you say was the one thing from middle school that made you want to be in school, if any?
Just the friends, I guess. I mean, I was like very distracted, but the friends.
The friends? That's good. What was your relationship like with the teachers and staff before your suspension?
I didn't really have any type of special relationship with any of the staff members. We were all just pretty neutral, student, teacher, whatever. But I did have a favorite teacher though. I hated the admin. I know hate is a very strong word, but the admin sucked. They did not help anything, and they were obviously a part of the upcoming issue about to be discussed.
And were there any particular classes, clubs, or moments that made you feel confident or seen?
I can't remember if there were any classes or clubs that really made me feel seen or confident. I do know there was this one club called Pride Pack though. It was an after-school club that helped kids a part of the LGBTQ plus community feel seen and heard. We did all sorts of activities, and thoughts and opinions were always heard and considered by everyone.
That's good, yeah. So that kind of wraps up segment one. And then just for the listeners, can you tell them what grade are you entering this upcoming school year?
I'm going to be a junior.
Junior. So since the incident, it's been 5 years?
4.
4 years? All right, segment two, the day of the suspension. Can you walk us through what happened that day from the first sign something was off to when you were told you were suspended?
So this is going to be very long, but I had been audio recording every class that day because of a lot of stuff happening in that school that nobody would believe happened if it didn't, especially by admin. So I walked into math, and we had a substitute due to my teacher being on maternity leave, I think. And this was a substitute that I've had before. I never liked him. He was an old man, 70 to 80 years of age, maybe. And we'll call him Mr. P. Of course, we would call him that, fine, whatever. Seeing him as my teacher was the first red flag to me. We had a test that day. I'm sitting at a table near 2 of my friends. I will admit, we were whispering a little bit here and there. I was in fetal position on my chair, legs closed, knees to chest. I was wearing baggy clothing. Some time passed, and we began taking the test. Not long after, my friends and I started hearing the sub saying something along the lines of, "Your feet shouldn't be in the air, put your feet down." And that was another time I knew something was off. But we didn't know who he was talking to, so we brushed it off. Mind you, I had my back facing towards him, so I definitely wouldn't have known because he didn't mention any names. A couple minutes later, he said, "Get your feet out of the air and stop talking," or something like that. And none of my friends and one of my friends asked whose feet were in the air, and the sub said hers. It was then at that moment my friend realized he was talking about me. So she turned to me and said, "Taylor, he's talking about you." But I ignored it because I wasn't doing anything wrong and my feet weren't in the air. The sub then comes over to me and starts raising his voice at me to put my feet down, and that how I was sitting was inappropriate, and began saying that nobody else was doing it, so I shouldn't be either. And then he started berating me over what question of the test I was on and that I should be further. I turned around and refused to put my feet down, asked him how it was inappropriate, which he avoided answering, and then I told him that difficulty levels are different for different people. He continues yelling at me while I'm still working on the test and keeping a neutral tone with him. He then called the dean down and was saying that I was being loud and not putting my feet down, and the dean asked me to go with him, in which I refused because, again, I wasn't doing anything wrong. And then the dean radioed up to the office asking for a parent's number, in which I told him I can give it to him. So he goes to the classroom phone and asks for the number in front of the whole class, so I gave it to him in front of the whole class, and I told him she wouldn't care, my mom, and that she wasn't going to pick up because she was working. Sure enough, she didn't pick up. Soon, the dean turns around and gives me two options. Either grab my stuff and go with him to the office, or he escorts everybody out of the class and gives me out-of-school suspension for the rest of the year, which was only a few days. Again, I refused to move. So he escorts everyone out, and my friends start frantically telling me to just go to the office, and I said no. I had a few people tell me that they said how I was sitting all the time on their way out. The principal soon came down to the room and was talking to me, basically saying that I was in the wrong. He said I didn't have to make a scene, and all I had to do was put my feet down and I wouldn't have been suspended or something like that. I could have something wrong in that, but that's the concept. But that's how I knew it was over how I was sitting and not over me talking. My counselor was not contacted to try and help before things escalated, so she ended up coming down after everything. She was talking to me and was trying to get me to go up to her office. I told her no and that I wasn't moving until my mom got there.
That's a lot. That's a lot that happened. And was this towards the end of the school day or middle, beginning?
It was in the middle of the school
Middle
day
school day. Okay. Huh, that
because I think
that's
math was my third period at that point.
okay. And it's crazy because like I've had you in my class this last school year, and you still sit in that fetal position, right? And I don't know why a teacher would find that troubling. I feel like students should be allowed to sit however they want to sit, as long as you're doing your thing. A teacher shouldn't care how you sit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as after this getting escorted or getting all the students escorted, did anyone ask for your version of events before the suspension was decided, or was it just they took the substitute teacher's version and took that as the only truth?
Nobody asked me for my side or my version before the decision was made. The principal and the dean were both going based off of what the sub said and didn't care about how unfair it was over a sitting position. Although my friends knew what was going on, and I'm pretty sure everybody else in the class knew what was going on. And I think my counselor had asked me after everything had happened, after the decision was made. But before, nobody asked me for my version of it.
And do you know if the principal or dean asked any of your classmates what had happened?
I'm not sure because I don't think they would have had to because everybody was witnessing it happen. And like I said, the substitute was raising his voice at me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm pretty sure everybody heard.
Okay. And then what were your thoughts and emotions when you realized you had been excluded from school?
I wasn't super upset over being suspended. I was more upset over the unfairness and how stupid it all was. Um, and over how like inappropriate and unprofessional the sub was being. I was also upset that a substitute got me suspended, of all things. I don't exactly know what my thoughts were at the time, though.
Sort of wraps up segment 2 and going transition to segment 3. Sort of your family being notified and the response. So who was the first person that was notified about your suspension,
It was my mom.
and how did she react?
She was mad. Like, she was extremely mad because I was the one that told her. Now, like I mentioned, the dean did try contacting her from the school phone, but she didn't pick up. Like I said, she was at work. She
Right.
wasn't going to pick up. But then later on, she tried calling the school phone back, but of course nobody picked that up because I was talking to my counselor at that time.
Hmm.
And then she texted me, and then I asked her if she could call me, and then I think at that point I had told her I was suspended, like over the phone call.
Did the school offer any explanation or documentation to your mom?
Yes, they did.
And what was it that they told her?
They left her a voicemail saying that I was being disruptive, but I had already told her what had happened before. So, yeah, she was mad.
And did she by any chance push back or try like to find out why you were being disruptive?
Uh, Towards the dean, I don't think so. But again, I had already told her
Hmm.
what had happened. So, and we've had trouble with school before, so she knew like not to trust the
Okay.
admin.
Yeah. And yeah, and that's with schools, like they tend to label their students, and it's like, and it's been mentioned in previous episodes where like we label our students, right? And that label sticks with them for a really long time, right? So like, for example, I in elementary was always told in conferences that I talk a lot in class, right? And it's just, I don't know, it's just I've always been pretty social. So like during conference time, my teachers would always tell my parents like, oh, your student or your kid talks a lot in class. Um, and that sort of transitioned into middle school and later into high school. So yes, so labels is a big thing that teachers should always watch out when it comes to their students, right? We're going to our next segment. How did the suspension affect your mental health and sense of safety at school?
I mean, I was fine the day after it happened. Of course, I was like, my blood was still boiling like the day of, but I didn't really care because, hey, I got out of school. But it did alter my entire view on the school, and I like despised them. I didn't feel safe at school at all because of how bad the admin was.
Hmm. And what was it like coming back? Well, did you come back to school before school year ended, or did you start fresh the following school year?
Following school year because he had given me out of school suspension for
For
the rest of the year.
okay, and it was how many days?
3, 4.
3, 4 days. Okay. So when you came back to school the following school year, or starting as an eighth grader, did your classmates ever bring that suspension up or that incident up again, or did any of your former teachers?
None of my classmates brought it up. Like I went in, I had gone over the suspension. I went in with a positive attitude because it was a fresh start. I had avoided the admin because I didn't want contact with them. And I didn't want anyone to bring up the suspension. No classmates, like I said, brought it up. But then one day the dean had called me down to his office and I was not happy about it. But I walked in and I said, "What?" He offered me to sit and I said no and just stood by the door. Easy escape. He just began apologizing, saying he knew it was unfair and he wanted me to know that. And when he was done, all I said was, "Can I go now?" And he said yes. So I left. No forgiveness, nothing. Nobody treated me differently though. Everything was fine.
Okay. And did this change how you saw your school or how you behaved in school?
It definitely changed how I viewed school. It did change also how I behaved. Instead of like being outgoing and putting myself out there, I began keeping to myself more. Um, but I never did anything bad. I was a good student. At least I personally think I was.
That's good, yeah. And how did your perspective change from of school before and after the incident?
Well, like I said, it's just like the admin. Like I knew there was issues with them beforehand, but I never knew like they would go to that length to suspend somebody over a sitting position.
Hmm.
So that just like proved to me that it's like they don't care. It's unfair. They know it's unfair, but they don't care.
And the desks at your middle school, were they similar to how they are at the high school?
Yes.
For those who are listening in, so the desks and the chairs are attached through the metal frame. So if you move the chair, it moves the desk with it, and vice versa. So that kind of wraps up segment 4. So going to our fifth segment, academic disruption. What assignments or learning opportunities did you miss those last couple of days of school?
I didn't really miss anything because we had a bunch of tests like the day that I got suspended.
Uh,
So the last couple of days were just I don't know what it was like. I think it was chill, but I don't think I had any assignments. So there wasn't anything that I really missed. I do know I had to finish my test after I got suspended though. Like when I went home, I had to finish it at home. But I
okay.
think that's it.
And then after you were suspended, did any of your other teachers try reaching out to you, try to support you in any other way?
No teachers reached out to me and there wasn't since nobody reached out to me, there obviously wasn't support.
Right.
So,
And then did this influence your grades or your attendance the following school year?
the following school year, it didn't affect my attendance or influence it or anything like that. I don't think it did. It didn't influence my academic confidence or my grades either, I don't think. I'm not entirely sure though, because 8th grade was a whole nother heap of mess. That's for another time. But I don't think it influenced any of that.
No. What about that same school year or those last couple of days? Did grades or how did you do on that test that you had to finish at home?
I got a good score on the test. It did obviously influence my attendance.
Right.
Um, but my grades, I don't think it changed.
No? Yeah, okay. Going on to our sixth segment, reflections on fairness and bias. Do you feel the punishment fit the situation?
I absolutely do not think the punishment fit the situation because suspending me for sitting in a fetal position and refusing to put my feet down is just stupid. It doesn't make sense. Like everybody sits like that at one point in their life or another.
Mm-hmm.
So over a sitting position, fetal position, that wasn't even inappropriate.
Right.
That's really beyond stupid.
And when you say fetal position, that you're referring to your knees going like up to your chest?
Yes, my knees were up to my chest. They were closed. I was wearing baggy clothing, but then the sub was saying it was inappropriate. So
Okay.
that's just like, yikes.
Right. A red flag.
Red flag.
And were there peers who did similar things or classmates who did similar things and received lighter consequences?
Refusing to do things, yes, there have been later consequences. See, sitting in fetal position, everyone has sat like that. Like I said, at some point, kids in my class have. I've seen them. And like I said, my classmates were telling me like they sit like that all the time. So, and this is when they were being like leaving the classroom. They were stopping by my desk to tell me they sit like that all the time. So
the fetal position sitting was also, they also sat like that in front of the substitute.
I'm not sure because I had my back faced towards a lot of the class, so I wasn't paying attention to how anybody else was sitting.
Okay.
So in that moment, in that classroom on that day, I'm not sure if anybody else was sitting like that. I don't think anybody was because he said nobody else is doing it. You shouldn't be either. But kids sit like that all the time.
Right. And then looking back, what factors do you think influence on how you were disciplined?
There shouldn't have been any other factors because I was a good kid. I never argued with any of the teachers. I'm pretty sure my grades were good. I wasn't failing. I know that's for sure. And I never had any personal issues with admin. I just never liked them because of all the stuff happening around the school that they wouldn't help with. I had never gotten in trouble before the suspension. So there was literally no other contributing factors to my suspension.
So you were overall just a good kid, and this was just a one-time incident where you were treated unfairly.
Yeah. I mean, I know there were like a couple other times where I was like having really bad anxiety attacks, and I may have gotten a little attitude with the principal because he was trying to move me from where I was at.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, no, I can't move. I'm kind of like paralyzed right now. So that would have been maybe the only time I would have gotten an attitude with admin, but I can't see why that would be an issue or a factor contributing to my suspension.
Right. Did any of your friends or mentors, which we kind of already talked, show up after?
My friends were like very supportive of me. They were like keeping me in the loop with stuff happening at school. Obviously, the two friends that were experiencing it all or like witnessing it all, they were there for me. But like anybody else, not really. My mom was just the main part of it, like being there and supporting me and stuff like that, because she was just as mad as I was.
No, that's good to have.
If not even more mad.
Yeah, that's good to have someone to stand up with you. That's good. And then were there any programs, counselors, or restorative options offered to help? So, for example, did anyone try to say, like, instead of getting you suspended, let's try this? Like, let's do a restorative circle and talk about what happened and how we can fix that.
No, I was just given an option to either go up to the office or I was suspended.
So either way, you were going to be excluded from the classroom one way or another.
Either way, yeah.
Either, okay.
But there was a program that was offered to me after it all happened. I was offered the 504 plan. Because one thing I didn't mention prior because I left it for this question, is I sit like that usually because of my anxiety. So it gives me like a sense of security.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when my 504 plan started. That way I could have that to accommodate me and my anxiety. That way I can't get in trouble for it anymore. I mean, I
Okay.
shouldn't have been getting in trouble for it in the first place,
Right.
but yeah.
Yes. And then for those who don't know what a 504 plan, 504 plan is a formal support system that's offered here in the United States public schools to ensure students with disabilities have equal access to education. It's named after the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination based on disability. And so, what this does, it provides accommodations to help students learn alongside their peers in general education settings. It also removes barriers to learning without changing what the student is expected to learn, as well as protect the rights of the students with physical or mental impairments that substantially limit major life activities such as learning, concentrating, communicating, or even feeling. And so some examples of these accommodations can include extra time on tests or assignments, preferential seating, such as near the teacher, in a corner, in front of the class, in the back of the class. Also, the use of assistive technology, modified textbooks or audiobooks, access to nurse for medical needs, and adjusted class schedules or verbal testing. And sort of how this process is started or created, it needs to be referred by a parent, a teacher, or staff member, and then that student gets evaluated through medical records, academic performance, and teacher input. And then the student must also have documented impairment that affects major life activity. And then a team, usually including a parent, a teacher, and administrators, they create the plan. And then the plan is then put into action and reviewed regularly to ensure its effectiveness. Sort of leading to the next question, what helped you keep going emotionally and academically after that?
My mom played a huge part in helping me move forward and supporting me emotionally and academically. She has always had my back with everything, and she continues to. But another thing that helped me was my mindset. I continue to remind myself how stupid it was and to not let it get to me. My friend's support at the time also helped me.
That's good. Yes. And then going sort of into our last segment here, growth, advice, and vision. How did that experience shape your views on justice and education?
That experience has caused me to keep my guard up whenever there is an old male substitute. I know categorization. Um, but it has also programmed my brain to think that whenever there is an inconvenience at school, that the admin won't care to listen to or believe the student's side. So whenever something happens, I do audio record to back myself up. I personally don't think that staff care about the education of a student if they are a target, especially at OGM. It has shown me that justice is never fair, and teachers or admin are more likely to believe other staff members over students, even without proof.
What advice would you give to students in a similar situation today?
I would say stick up for yourself. Don't bend or break over something so stupid. Send a message and always get a trusted adult involved and record. Always have your own back and cover your grounds. People will go lengths to cover themselves, so gather your proof and cover yourself. But don't do anything that will get you into more trouble. Stay confident and keep your head up.
That's good. That's good advice. And then sort of your transition from middle to high school. I know at the high school you're at right now has more practices that sort of help keep students in the classroom. What's your opinion on that? What do you think that's a good thing? Do you think it's working for students, or is it a hit or miss?
It can be a hit or miss. I think it more depends on the teacher
Mhm.
rather than the admin because I don't really know. Like it's just a hit or miss. I think the school that I'm at now, like they're definitely way better than my middle school. They do help accommodate or like help students with stuff like that. And I haven't seen any unreasonable suspensions here yet. So, but I think it is really helpful and I'm really happy they have more practices than the middle school because that was yikes.
Yeah, no, that's good. What would you change in the system, in the education system, school system, to prevent unfair suspensions from happening?
Well, I don't really know what the system is actually like, but I would definitely make sure both sides are heard and considered before decisions are made. Another thing I would change is how substitutes are able to get someone suspended. I personally think that subs have no authority and that the situation should be looked deeper into, unless the substitute is an actual teacher in the school just covering for another teacher. I would also change the options. I feel like suspensions are always quickly considered for such small things. I would add less severe options. I don't know exactly what those options would be though. And I know I had two options, but immediately resorting to a suspension as one of them is just insane to me. But both parties should definitely be heard.
Sounds good, yes. So thanks for being in today's episode. I appreciate your time. Thank you. That was the story of Taylor, suspended not for what she did, but for how the system responded to her presence. A story told not with bitterness, but with bravery. In hearing her voice, we are reminded behind every disciplinary action is a child, one who deserves support, understanding, and a dignity, not exclusion. What happened to her wasn't just a policy decision, it was a moment that shaped her relationship with education, with teachers, with adults, and perhaps with herself. And for too many students, especially those from marginalized communities, that moment comes far too soon and far too often. As we close this chapter, let's carry her story with us. Let it sit heavy if it needs to. Let it provoke the questions schools often avoid. And above all, let it remind us that justice in education starts with listening, with believing young people when they tell us what hurts. If this episode moved you, challenged you, or made you see things differently, share it. Let these stories ripple outward, because the voices you've heard aren't just testimonies, they are calls to action. I am Uriel, and this is Classrooms and Jail Cells, where the truth isn't just told, it's felt. See you next time.